There is a version of pain that leaves no bruise, no scar, no shattered bone. Nothing visible enough for the world to point at and say, there, that is where you were hurt. And maybe that is why you learned to hide it so well. Because invisible pain teaches you a dangerous skill. It teaches you how to suffer quietly. You smile, you function, you answer messages, you show up, and somewhere along the way, people begin believing you are fine. Maybe you even started believing it yourself. But deep inside, something felt heavy. Not dramatic, not loud, just heavy. Like carrying emotional weight that had no name. Because being an empath was never simply about feeling deeply. That explanation is too small for what you have lived. Feeling deeply sounds beautiful, poetic, almost romantic. But you know another side of it. The side nobody talks about. The exhaustion. The emotional overcrowding. The strange loneliness of sensing things you cannot explain. You walk into a room and feel tension before words are spoken. You notice shifts in tone. Silence that feels sharp. Smiles that feel forced. And while others move through life hearing only language, you hear energy. You hear what people hide. And for a long time you treated this as responsibility. You became the emotional translator. The one who understood without explanation. The one who noticed pain before it was admitted. The one who carried emotional temperature inside your body like weather. And people loved this about you. At least, they loved benefiting from it. Because empathy is admired most when it is convenient. When it comforts. When it forgives. When it absorbs. But the moment empathy asks for understanding in return, the room often grows quiet. Maybe you know this silence. Maybe you have lived inside it. The silence of comforting people who never asked if you were tired. The silence of checking on everyone while secretly hoping somebody notices the storm inside. You. The silence of being called strong when what you really needed was softness. And this is where many empaths become trapped. You learned early that being needed felt safer than being known. So you became useful, helpful, available. You became skilled at reading others while losing connection with yourself. And nobody noticed the cost. Not even you. Because self-abandonment rarely announces itself like tragedy. It enters gently. You excuse behavior that hurts you. You minimize your own needs. You tell yourself to be more understanding, more patient, more forgiving. And little by little, your own voice becomes quieter. Until one day something strange happens. You realize you know everyone else's emotional landscape, but you barely know your own. That realization hurts. Because you spent years becoming a sanctuary for people who never learned how to protect your peace. You became the safe place, the healer, the listener, the emotional shelter. And maybe why? Or wore that role proudly. Maybe it gave your heart purpose, but purpose can become prison when it demands your disappearance. And this is the truth few people will tell you. Some of your kindness was love, but some of it was survival. That truth is uncomfortable, because survival empathy looks noble from the outside, but internally, it is exhausting. You monitor reactions, avoid conflict, carry tension. Manage emotions that were never yours to hold, not because you are weak, but because somewhere inside you, a quiet fear formed. The fear that if you stopped giving, stopped understanding, stopped carrying, you might stop being loved, so you adapted. And adaptation became identity. But identities built on survival eventually crack, because the soul cannot endlessly perform against its own truth. That is why you feel different now, why your heart feels tired in ways sleep cannot fix, why certain conversations drain you, why forced connection feels unbearable. You are not becoming cold, you are becoming conscious. And consciousness changes everything. Because the life nobody saw inside you, the hidden grief, the emotional labor, the invisible exhaustion, was never proof that you were broken. It was proof that you survived by carrying more than you were ever meant to hold. And maybe this is the first truth your heart needs to hear. You were never meant to disappear inside your own compassion. You were meant to exist inside it too. This phase does not arrive gently. It does not knock. It enters like emotional weather you cannot control. And at first, you mistake it for burnout, stress, mood swings. You tell yourself you are simply tired. But this exhaustion feels different. Sleep does not touch it. Rest does not solve it. Because this is not ordinary exhaustion. This is the exhaustion that appears when your soul grows tired of performing survival. For years, you knew how to play the role, the understanding one, the forgiving one, the emotionally available one. You learned how to smooth tension before conflict erupted, how to make others comfortable, how to swallow disappointment and still offer kindness. And maybe those skills protected you once. Maybe they helped you survive spaces where your own needs felt inconvenient. But survival identities have an expiration date, and eventually, the mask becomes heavier than the wound it once covered. That is where the breaking begins. Not outside you, inside you. Suddenly, things you once tolerated start feeling unbearable. Conversations feel forced. Certain friendships feel strangely draining. You leave interactions exhausted instead of fulfilled. And the most confusing part? Nothing around you may have changed. The same people, the same dynamics, the same emotional patterns. Yet something inside you refuses to cooperate anymore. This is the moment many empaths panic, because the old version of you knew exactly how to maintain peace. You knew how to keep relationships stable, how to avoid disappointing people, how to remain emotionally useful. But now, your body hesitates, your energy pulls back, and you do not understand why. So you blame yourself. You wonder, am I becoming selfish? Too sensitive? Too distant? But this phase is not selfishness. It is awareness. And awareness is disruptive. Because once you become conscious of emotional imbalance, you cannot comfortably participate in it anymore. That realization is painful. You begin noticing things you once ignored. The conversations that revolve only around their pain. The people who call only when they need emotional rescue. The relationships built on your patience but not your reciprocity. And suddenly, you see a truth that shakes you. Some people were attached to your service, not your soul. That truth hurts more than anger, because you love sincerely, you gave sincerely, and discovering imbalance feels like betrayal. Not only by others, but sometimes by yourself. You begin grieving your own silence. The times you said yes while resentment grew inside you. The times you explained away disrespect. The moments you abandoned your feelings to preserve connection. That grief is heavy, because empaths do not merely lose people. They lose imagined futures, potential, hope, the version of connection they believed could exist if they loved hard enough. And this is why Phase 2 feels devastating. You are not only grieving relationships, you are grieving illusion. The illusion that endless understanding creates healthy love. The illusion that sacrifice guarantees loyalty. The illusion that self-erasure earns emotional safety. And when those illusions collapse, your inner world shakes. This is where loneliness often appears. Not dramatic loneliness, quiet loneliness. You withdraw, spend more time alone. Not because you hate people, but because overstimulation suddenly feels painful. Your nervous system grows tired of performance. You no longer want shallow conversations, forced energy, emotional acting. And people may misunderstand this. They may say, "You've changed. You're different. You used to be easier." And perhaps they are right. You are changing. Because the version of you that survived through overgiving is beginning to dissolve. That dissolution feels frightening. There may be guilt, confusion, even fear. Because you stand between two identities, no longer comfortable being who you were, but uncertain about who you are becoming. And this space feels unstable, like emotional demolition. You try returning to old patterns, being agreeable again, more available, more accommodating, but something inside resists. Because once the soul tastes honesty, performance becomes painful. You cannot know what you now feel. And this is the brutal beauty of breaking. It is not destruction. It is refusal. Your soul refusing emotional labor. That destroys you. Refusing intimacy built on self-neglect. Refusing love that requires your disappearance. That refusal may look messy, lonely, uncomfortable, but do not mistake discomfort for failure. Something sacred is happening beneath the chaos. The breaking is not evidence that you are losing yourself. It is evidence that you are finally refusing to lose yourself anymore. And that refusal changes the direction of your entire life. And then, after the confusion, after the emotional exhaustion, after the loneliness of becoming unfamiliar to yourself, something begins to change. Not suddenly, not dramatically. There is no lightning, no perfect breakthrough, only a quiet shift. A strange calm entering places inside you that once lived in survival. This is the awakening. And most people misunderstand what awakening feels like. They imagine endless peace, constant certainty, a life untouched by pain. But real awakening is quieter than fantasy. It is number. The absence of struggle. It is the end of unconscious suffering. Because something powerful happens when your soul grows tired of bleeding for acceptance. You stop chasing, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally became honest about the cost. For years, your empathy may have functioned like an open wound. You felt everything, carried everything, absorbed emotions that never belonged to you. And somewhere deep inside, you believed love required this sacrifice. You believed compassion meant endurance. That understanding meant self-denial. That being a good person meant remaining endlessly available. But awakening dismantles those beliefs. Slowly, relentlessly. And at first, this shift feels unfamiliar. You notice yourself pausing before saying yes, thinking before over-explaining, stepping back instead of rushing to rescue. That pause matters, because for much of your life, your empathy reacted automatically. Someone suffered, you carried it. Psalm. Eon needed support, you abandoned your own needs. Someone pulled away, you blamed yourself. But now, something different guides you. Discernment. And discernment changes everything. Because awakened empathy is not emotional surrender. It is emotional wisdom. You still care, still feel deeply, still notice what others overlook. But you no longer confuse sensitivity with obligation. That distinction frees you. You begin understanding a truth that once felt impossible. You are not responsible for healing everyone you love. That realization is uncomfortable, maybe even painful, because your identity once revolved around emotional rescue. Being needed felt meaningful, being useful felt safe. And releasing that role can feel like losing part of yourself. But what you are losing is not love. It is a survival attachment. And survival attachment often disguises itself as devotion. You stay too long, excuse too much, carry too heavily. Not always because the connection N is healthy, but because leaving feels like guilt. Awakening exposes this pattern. And once you see it, you cannot comfortably return to blindness. This is where your empathy changes shape. It stops bleeding and starts leading. You no longer enter every emotional storm without protection. You observe, listen, care, but you do not dissolve. That difference is sacred, because compassion without boundaries becomes self-destruction. And for the first time, you understand that boundaries are not walls. They are wisdom. They are the language of self-respect. You stop apologizing for needing space. Stop defending your need for peace. Stop treating your emotional limits like moral failure. And this shift surprises people. Some may call you distant, changed, harder to reach. But what they are witnessing is not coldness. It is alignment. The old version of you believed love meant constant access. The awakened version understands that access must be earned. That regarding. Alization transforms your relationships. You stop asking, how do I keep them happy? And begin asking, what happens to me inside this connection? That question becomes your compass, because awakened empathy pays attention to internal truth. You notice how your body responds around people, whether you feel safe, drained, expanded, or diminished. And you trust those signals, not fearfully, wisely. This wisdom changes your loneliness too. Earlier in life, solitude may have felt painful, like abandonment. Proof you were unwanted, but awakening teaches another truth. Solitude is not always emptiness. Sometimes it is recovery, a sacred return, a place where your nervous system remembers what peace feels like without performance. And here is the transformation few people talk about. You stop asking the world for permission to exist as yourself. You stop shrinking to maintain connection. Stop translating your soul into smaller language so others remain comfortable. Because something finally becomes clear. Your empathy was never the wound. The wound was believing your empathy required self-erasure. And once that illusion breaks, your entire life changes. You still love, still feel, still care with remarkable depth. But now, your heart belongs to you first. And that changes everything. Because the empath who once bled to be accepted eventually becomes the soul who leads with compassion, without abandoning itself along the way. So here you are. Maybe somewhere between phases, maybe grieving, maybe awakening, maybe exhausted from pretending you are not changing. But hear this carefully. You are not falling apart. You are confronting the cost of living disconnected from yourself. And yes, that confrontation hurts. Growth often does. Because awakening is not becoming somebody new. It is becoming impossible to keep betraying who you already are. That is why certain relationships feel different. Why certain conversations drain you. Why your tolerance for emotional dishonesty keeps shrinking. Your soul is not becoming difficult. It is becoming discerning. There is a difference. And maybe nobody taught you this. So learn it now. You are allowed to outgrow survival versions of yourself. Allowed to release roles. Allowed to stop performing emotional labor for access to love. Allowed to protect your peace without guilt. Because your life changes the moment you realize this brutal truth. Not everyone who needs your light deserves your exhaustion. Read that again inside your heart. Not everyone who needs your light deserves your exhaustion. And maybe this is your turning point. Maybe this is the moment you stop apologizing for needing rest, for needing truth, for needing boundaries. Because awakened empaths do not become heartless. They become aligned. And alignment feels different, calmer, stronger, sacred. You stop chasing belonging and start building it within yourself. You stop begging people to understand your soul and start understanding it yourself. That is the real awakening, not mystical performance, not spiritual identity, but the courage to finally stand beside your own heart. So if you are in phase 1, be honest. If you are in phase 2, be patient. And if you are entering phase 3, protect what is being born inside you. Because the empath who once bled for acceptance eventually becomes the soul who no longer abandons itself for love. And that changes everything.